see myself. I didn't even know, you could probably tell for a second there, that we were live, that we were going live. This is part of the fun and excitement of being on a live stream. And now that technology is caught up to where we're at, I want to welcome everyone to the Worth Knowing live stream. It's on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson, and on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube, where you can join in both portrait and landscape format. That's right. We play both kinds, country and Western. Speaking of quotes and ideas from 50 years ago, I'm kind of pepped up and a little nervous right now. Like it's the moment before tip-off in the NBA Finals, and it's the Celtics versus the Lakers, and I'm on the bench. I know I'm about to get in the game, and I've kind of set myself up for disaster today. That I'm nervous. I got to admit, I get a little edge from that. I might be having Shaq send my shot into the third row. In just a minute, I'm going to bring on a guest who will be sticking my ball into the stands. Here's the deal. My little joke about quotes and references from 50 years ago comes from my view. The Democrats are stuck in an old system that doesn't come up to win. Building stuff that we do a long time ago, sometimes okay, right? Like if it ain't, fix it. But in 2028, when Democrats are trying to defeat the successor, not only Donald Trump, but to MAGA Trumpism in what might be our last against the corrupt authoritarian cabal that's taken over the Republican Party and by extension America, we can't afford to do anything just because it's the way we've done it before, not with the Republic on the line. So yesterday, I wrote an article on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson, called Democrats Are Trying to Solve the Wrong Problem. Again, I made a case that as Democrats have been huddled for the last month or so, trying to figure out what order the states will go in on the 2028 presidential nominating calendar, we've kind of lost the forest for the trees. There are party insiders that I quoted in my article. The importance of thinking about the calendar is that it establishes the narrative of what the Democratic Party is about, and respectfully, no, it's not. Or that's the second is galactically stupid in this article. I was saying that we have a system that gives more delegates, in other words, more weight and power to states that have a bigger share of Democratic voters. In other words, the bluer your state, the more say you get in who our nominee is. Now, maybe that made a bit more sense like 4 or 5 decades ago when voters would split their ticket or swing back and forth between the parties from election to election, maybe. But nowadays, we know that most states are for conclusion. The future existence of the United States of America is going to come down to a handful of voters in like 6, 8, maybe 10 states. So I argue that all this fuss that we've been having about which states go first is missing the bigger point. Our whole system is backwards. We need to be doing what we can to make the Democrats in the deciding states the most important deciders on who our candidate is. I live in Massachusetts. Honestly, why should we rely on perceptions of who the strongest candidate is over someone in Wisconsin? But that's what we do. Even though Massachusetts and Wisconsin have the same number of electoral votes, Democrats in Massachusetts get way more delegates and therefore way more say than Democrats in Wisconsin. And by the way, we also earlier than Wisconsinites too. To be clear, I'm not jumping all over the Democratic Party for talking about this right now. I know there are things that are more urgent, but urgent and important are not the same thing. As Barack Obama said, you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I should have done my Obama impression. I'm so proud of it. Anyway, later. Look, I know we're deeply concerned about the authoritarian threat that Donald Trump has openly made to suppress the vote in the 2026 midterms. I know we've been talking a lot about the paramilitary attack that he's waged on American citizens in Minnesota. The urgent issue. Party, who our next leader will be, and whether we reach the power to stop the truly dark forces that have gripped Republicans and the executive branch, that's all on the line in 2028. So it's important. And I think we're missing it. I think we need to give way more power to states, front load, but here on part. In front of true experts with no advanced knowledge of what they will say about them, and then hear in real time what their reaction is. And that's what because I am welcoming back the former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Jamie Harrison. Now, here's the good news. Jamie and I have known each other for 20 years. I respect the hell out of him. Hopefully he respects the heck out of me, like a little heck. So if I'm about to get my shot blocked in the third row, at least he won't flex on me afterwards. But the bad news is Jamie and I can be very honest with one another. So I think he's about to tell it to me straight. I apologize to absolutely everybody for the technical problems. This is the peril of modern life. But I'm thrilled to welcome you back, Jamie. You look fantastic.
Well, thank you, man. It's so good to see you, and Happy New Year to you. I think
Oh
this is
my
the first
gosh,
time we're
lag.
together. Yeah, there is a little lag. And I don't know, is it my Wi-Fi or is it yours?
I don't know what's happening, but we operate off of a platform called StreamYard. I've never, boy, I sound like every man I've ever heard of. I've never had this particular problem before, but people in the chats are telling me it's choppy and I keep freezing and there are technical problems. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to leave the studio and come back in. I'm going to keep the stream going. I hope this works. I've never tried this before. There's something going on with the platform. Maybe the Trump people found out. Let's see if this works. And hang on there, Jamie. Hang on.
I will.
You are an experienced host on camera now. We're at your table now for like.
Well, folks, until Matt gets his stuff back up, it's good to see you all. It's good to take over Matt's program for a few minutes until he gets back here. But I am looking forward to having this conversation with him about this presidential primary calendar and to let him know that I think he's a bit off base here. But happy to engage in that and happy to hear what type of questions that you all may have about this process. It should be a really, really interesting and fruitful conversation. Hopefully he'll get back to us in time, but really looking forward to chatting with him about it. And again, hearing from you all in terms of the things that you believe we need to take into that we need to factor as we move through this process, because it's a process that we go through every 4 years. This is not something new that the party does. They do it every 4 years in terms of the evaluation of where we're going in terms of the presidential primary calendar. And so it's something that I'm glad we do, because it allows us to evaluate what happened in the past, look at making any needed and necessary adjustments, and then move forward so that we have a strong process, which I believe that we actually do have a strong process. But I think Matt disagrees, so we'll hear him out and see why, and see if we can poke a few holes into his theory. So hopefully we'll hear he'll get back up soon. I think that's him now. I see a box popping up.
Okay. Am I here?
You're here.
That was terrible. I'm so sorry to do that.
Well, Matt, and it's still kind of choppy. I don't know if we go.
All right, I see myself.
Yep.
Oh boy.
I wonder,
okay,
Matt, if
I hear you. I'm back.
But I think there's still a lag, my friend.
Oh, geez. Well, here we go. This is, I guess, like I said, the perils of modern technology. We will just do our best, and hopefully, even with a little bit of the lag, we'll be able to soldier on. All right, look, I've already set you up in the worst possible way. That was like a ding dong dash I just did to you. It's like I set you up for this big thing where you were gonna slam me back, and then I disappeared on you. So let's see with everything I just set up for you, what was your reaction to my article?
Well, Matt, I think
am I absolutely crazy?
Well, I actually think the theory is a bit off. I think before we rush to fix the process, we need to be honest about what the problem is that we're actually trying to solve, and whether the cure, your cure, creates bigger risk than the disease, right? Listen, if you take a look at the presidential primary process that we have, which is also very similar to the presidential primary process that the Republicans have, when you think about it, Democrats have won the popular vote in 7 of the last 8 presidential elections. 7 of the last 8 presidential elections, we won the presidential primary process. When you take a look at the last 5 elections, Democrats have won 3 out of the last 5, right? Donald Trump won 2, Barack Obama won 2, Joe Biden won 1. And the 2 that Donald Trump won, Democrats were really, really, really close to that. And so the question is the process that we have right now in which we select the nominee for our party, is that broken? Is that the reason why we are not winning, why we did not win the presidential election against Donald Trump in those 2 out of the 5, those 2 of the 5 that we lost, right? So I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's the presidential primary process that is problematic. I think in terms of, well, one, just the whole notion, you're not going to win every race. You want to win every race, but you're not going to win every race, right? That I think understanding that is really important. But 2, I think we really need to look at the data and figure out, why did we lose the ones that we lost? And I don't think the presidential primary process is going to be in the top 5 of the reasons why we lost against Trump in either 2016 or in 2024. Did you get that, Matt?
All right, 99% of that. Yeah, right. So I'm hoping that, this is like, this is almost like a parody of, like a choppy conversation where we're like picking words out randomly. No, I get that. I mean, and I do think there's a little bit of a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy quality to this, of like, we're trying to determine the answer to life, the universe. We're not sure what question we're looking. We know the answer is 42. But what is the question that we're after? To me, I see your old friends. And so I know you have to be a little careful here, because you maintain relationships with a lot of these people who are on the inside. And I know these are smart people. I've worked with some of in what I see emerging from, like, even my old friends in New Hampshire. I was a chief of staff in the New Hampshire delegation. So like, we know a thing or two about jockeying for position in the presidential nominating process. I think most of it comes down to the motivation of wanting to have more influence, wanting to have more power internally. I don't think we're laser focused on what's going to get us to the result that helps us win. It was your former boss who saved the Republic temporarily, saved the Republic temporarily by endorsing Joe Biden in 2020. That was Jim Clyburn. He made the decision. He had the foresight, and thank goodness South Carolina was early enough in the process that he could have that kind of influence. And it's everything that activists are always against. They're against party insiders putting their thumb on the scale. And it turns out in this case, it was the right decision. And there's a saying, I mean, I know you're an NBA fan, you're a Lakers fan, which, is probably the worst thing about you. Like, there's a saying that if you win a championship, you never have to say you're sorry. Well, if you win the presidential election, you don't have to say you're sorry, right? And Representative Clyburn was spot on, and he was right, and he made the right decision. And I think it saved us from a total disaster. Now, unfortunately, we're living through that disaster, and I don't think we have margin. I guess let me ask you about this basic proposition. I think we can agree that Iowa voters, a lot of problems with the Iowa voters. There's a lot of problems with the Iowa caucus. I know you don't want to shit all over Iowa, but I'm going to. I love Iowans, but but I just don't see why I should have more sway, more voice, more of a vote in who the leader of our party is, what direction we're going to go, how we're going to go to battle to fight MAGAism. Why should I have more say than the people who are actually on the front lines doing the fight in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, even in New Hampshire, which is still a swing state? That's the thing that I keep coming back to. And, like, I know the party wants to have a big internal fight because we've been having it for 40 years about, are we progressive or are we centrist? I know we want to have that. The answer is we have to be both. Like, we can't be at each other's throats, and we've got to make a smart decision here. And so I still come back to it. It just really bothers me that I have more say than someone in Wisconsin.
Well, Matt, for me, the problem is not the process that we have now, right? The process that we have now is placed on top of a system that is already broken. The broken system is not the presidential primary process. It's the fact that to win a presidential election in this country, it is determined by the electoral college. I'm the electoral college has, I believe, is right now really destroying democracy as we know it in this country, because it's gotten down to, people in 43 of the other states who believe that their vote doesn't matter. And then we are only paying attention to folks in 7 states, right? That is fundamentally problematic. And why is that problematic? Is because, one, the presidential election is really important. It's very, very, very important, but it's not the most important. It is not the end all be all in terms of democracy in this country. And we see that right now, particularly when we have a fascist despot in the White House. Like, the states are so key right now in order to push back against the authoritarianism that we're seeing coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania. Well, in the system in which we are only focusing all of our energy and our attention on these 5, 6, 7 states, then, democracy in these other places fall apart. When people feel as though their voices are not heard or valued, then they stop participating in the process. What we need is, and why it's important that all people all across this country feel as though their vote is important, we need them to participate in this process. We need them to feel that their voices have value, that their votes have value. So to go further down the road of making them feel even more valueless in terms of the presidential primary process, you're in Massachusetts, it doesn't matter who you vote for because you're blue, or you're in Alabama, it doesn't matter who you vote for because you're red. The only people that it matters for is for Pennsylvania. The only people that matters for is Wisconsin. That is not the mark of a healthy democracy, right? When only those 7 states get a oversized participation to determine who is the president of all 50 states. And so, like, you want a process that rewards participation. You want a process that rewards party building. You want a process that rewards consistency and following the rules. And that's the process that we have now. If we fundamentally want to change this and make sure that we push back against what we see, let's get rid of the electoral college in and of itself, right? And let's go to where one person, one vote, so that everybody feels like their voices and their votes actually matter and have value. And I think that is the problem that we need to fix, not to tinker around with the presidential primary process, because I can tell you there's so many factors in terms of putting together that presidential calendar, Matt, that I think in your article we sort of lose a sense of. And what are some of those things? And maybe I'll pause there, and then I'll go back to why it is not just as simple. Say, let's start with the 7 battleground states and why that works, because it just doesn't work that easy. There are a lot of X's and O's and I's and T's that have to be dotted and crossed in order to move things around on that calendar. Because it's just not as simple as, well, this is what the Democratic Party wants, and therefore it happens.
All right. We lucked out there. I was trying to both listen to you. See, here's the problem. You're smarter than I am. I know this because you went to Yale Law School and I didn't. So I was trying my best to listen to you were saying and be IT support for the entire StreamYard platform. It's allowed to go out to all of these, social. And I wasn't doing a great job. I have to admit it. But I did hear everything you said. All right, I'll pick up the thread. And so we're kind of stuck with what we're stuck with. But there are things we can do. And you raised a core point, and it's a point you've raised before. It was part of your focus as us to take off our federal blinders as Democrats. We are so obsessed with the federal level. We are so obsessed with the presidency. And we kind of lose sight of the state level, which is incredibly important. And if anything, has maybe more leverage and more power, especially when it comes to elections. So let's stipulate your point that maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm just too focused on the presidential election solely. Our old friend, Mark Elias, a prominent attorney for the Democratic Party for years, I've worked with, someone I know you worked with, wrote an article, Democracy Docket, today saying, look, the urgent threat that we face right now to elections is Trump's open threats against the midterms, to nationalize the elections, which is unconstitutional and not going to happen, to put voter intimidation tactics into practice, send ICE to polling stations, continue pulling voter rolls. He suggests 3 steps that every state, every blue state where state legislators have the power to do these things, every state that can needs to enact immediately. Ban third-party voter challenges and other forms of what he calls vigilantism. Provide criminal and civil remedies for voter intimidation. Let's not forget that the Republican Party was under a consent decree that restricted their ability to do voter intimidation. Now, that was lifted about 5 or 6 years ago. Great. Thanks, Supreme Court. And revise and strengthen election certification laws so that we are clear that these are magisterial duties. It's not like, secretaries of state can come in and just declare whoever the fuck it is they want. Sorry, I shouldn't curse. I know you're anti-cursing. All right. Take us inside the room. You have led these meetings. You have been this is your pod is at our table. You are the chairman of the table. You have led the table at the conference room. You pulled in the lawyers. You pulled in the operatives. What is going on at DNC headquarters right now? How are they talking about protecting the midterms? How are they operationalizing it? What is happening right now to protect the 2026 midterms?
Well, Matt, I think Mark is spot on in terms of his recipe for what we need to do in the short term on the midterms and protecting that. I've been a big proponent that I believe that when we have power, and regardless of where that power is, either on the city level, on the state level, or on the federal level, we sure as hell better utilize it. We better do everything that we can to cement and protect the rights of voters in this country. And it's not the rights of Democratic voters. It's the right of all voters. I only feel like there's one pro-democracy party in this country right now, and that's the Democratic Party. Because yes, we would love for folks to vote for Democrats, but ultimately what we want is just to allow the American, if you're duly eligible to vote, then you should be able to vote, regardless of whether it's for a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. And I believe that as a fundamental tenet of who we are as a party. I don't believe that on the Republican side. They just want power and will do anything, including disenfranchising people, in order to secure that power. And we hear that from Donald Trump every single day. My hope is, I have not talked to Ken Martin, who's the new chair, about this, but my hope is he's doing what I used to do when I was the DNC chair, which is speaking with the representatives at the DGA, at the DCCC, at the DSCC, all of the federal and organizations, the Democratic secretaries of state, to make sure that they're all on the same page to figure out how they can protect votes and the rights of voters in their particular states. It's, I used to have a monthly meeting with the heads of my counterparts, my colleagues who headed up the other national committees for the various jobs. So nonetheless, I hope those conversations are being had, because they're really important and they're very necessary at this point.
Talk to me a little bit about kind of the 30,000 foot level. Not so much the tactics, which, clearly we agree. There's a lot of tactical work to be done on the legal protection front. Talk to me about the 30,000 foot strategic direction. There's a bit of a debate that's been unfolding in recent weeks about how Democrats should go after the horror that's unfolding in Minnesota. And I don't want to single out just Minnesota. That's been the worst of it, but it's happening in other places as well. And we've had a vibrant back and forth, let's say, and on this show where we've talked about, a few weeks ago, I had our friend Ryan McConaughey, who used to do Senate policy communications for Democratic senators, on explaining this is why Democratic senators are not thinking about trying to withhold funding for ICE right now. Here are the reasons. Here's kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And then Alex Preddy was murdered, and everything changed in 24 hours. And we did, in fact, draw a red line right there. And now that's evolved into a broader conversation within the party that goes to kind of the old, what's his name? The frickin' mud flower for George W. Bush. Karl Rove's old strategy of attack the strength. Go after the strong point for the opposing party. For years, Republicans thought that immigration and border issue. That's, they could always go back. Case of emergency, break glass, talk about immigrants, talk about the border. And they were largely right about that. But now polls show that the American people have really swung, especially when you focus on ICE, when you focus on the abuses that they're perpetrating. And so there's a real conversation happening among Democrats right now that it's time to play offense, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because politically we're at a moment where we can fundamentally reset this issue and this conversation. What do you make of that conversation? Is it time for Democrats to attack the strength when it comes to border issues and immigration?
Yeah, I think it's important for Democrats to make sure that we're not just sitting in a room amongst ourselves with some pollsters trying to figure out what is the most laboratory tested path forward from here. And I think it's really important for us to actually go into these communities where immigration is such a hot button issue and actually have real conversations with folks about how they think we need to move forward in this juncture, because that's the problem that I think both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have at times, Matt, is that they talk amongst the elites within their communities themselves, and they come up with these solutions that are not quite what the people actually want. I think what you're seeing right now in terms of the Republican Party, yes, I think generally the American people said this immigration stuff, this is an issue. We need some folks to address it. But the Republican Party, I don't believe, is addressing it in the manner in which the American people want. They are overreaching. They're doing too much. And at the same time, what I don't want is for the Democratic Party to say, you see the reaction that the American people are having right now to Republicans on immigration. Let us go into our little laboratory and huddle and come up with something, and then not have it be right on the mark, where it is actually going overboard and doing too much to respond to the Republican action that is doing too much. I think this is when having real conversations, being embedded with the folks on the ground and figuring out how are we addressing the issues that immigration brings up? How is it impacting, farming in this country? How is it impacting the economy in this country? How is it impacting safety and security in this country? And hearing from real everyday people about that, and then taking what they hear to then draft common sense legislation and policy that addresses those things, not what we want those things to address, but actually what the people want us to address. And I think that that's going to be the core. We can't just go off and do what parties normally do. And it's not something unique to the Democratic Party, but because we see it happening on the Republican Party. Too much Washington, D.C. conversations and too few conversations actually in communities with real people. I think if we do that, then we get our finger on the pulse, and then we're really we can build a lasting majority. But if we overplay our hands here, in the end of the day, we may win the majority and then lose it shortly thereafter.
Speaking of having real conversations with people, I want to highlight and above the technical problems that we're having on StreamYard today. I know I'm making excuses here. I don't like making excuses for anything, but it is what it is. That's what's going on. I'm not able to splash up all the comments happening, and that's due to this point. Most of my life, I thought uncontested races were it's only in recent years that are multi-time previous. Amanda Littman is trying to address and goes very much to your not at a 30,000 foot or federal level, but just like, hey, I'm your neighbor. Like, let's get into the school board issue and like, what do we do? I mean, like our middle school where I live is just such a freaking disaster. The roof is leaking. Like all my kids play basketball. They're in the gym. On one side, there is literally a clock that looks like Back to the Future, like it was struck by freaking lightning. And it was practically like years ago. The other side just has a missing clock. This is an embarrassment. Like bits of roof are falling down on these kids' heads. So that's the kind of thing that across party lines, doesn't really matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Of course, where I live in North Wokistan, everyone's a Democrat, but whatever. It doesn't really matter. You can have real conversations about problems like, and that's Amethyst Peony's point. But I want to get to your broader you just had a very real conversation with former U.S. House Representative Colin Allred, in which you talked about respect for voters and for candidates, and he said something really interesting. I was hoping you could give us a little more insight. He said, "Don't come to Black people every election cycle for our votes, and then be disrespectful of us as candidates, qualified candidates." What do you think he meant, and what did you hear? What did you take away from that?
This Texas and the Senate election is it's been really interesting, Matt, because, and I saw some of those coming off of the 2024 presidential, and I'm seeing it more right now. We know this administration and Republicans have led this anti-DEI, this anti-woke, anti-identity politics, but that's only identity politics when it relates to communities of color. When they're talking about Christian white evangelicals, that identity is fine. When they are talking about gun-toting, folks in Montana or in South Carolina, those folks are fine. That identity group, but it's only the identity groups when the melanin tends to be a little deeper, right? That's problematic. But I'm seeing a little of that creep into Democratic Party politics. And I see it with some of the comments, just the recent comments from James Carville that says, thinking about 2028, if you got two white guys running, and as long as they can go into a fish fry here in South Carolina or a black church and get the voters to sway and sing or something like that, then that's fine. That's the recipe for how you win. Well, that's a big slap in the face for a lot of folks. Listen, our identity is our identity, and particularly when you're a person of color, you can't run away from it, right? When I wake up in the morning, I'm a black guy. When I go to bed at night, I'm a black guy. When I'm driving my car, I'm a black guy, regardless of whether or not, and I can't change that, right? And I can't change the way that people react to the fact that I'm a black guy. For some people, it may not matter. For some, it does, right? And therefore, they interact with me based on that. But one of the things that I see right now in our party is folks who are quick to say, let's stop talking about identity politics. But then they want to talk identity politics when they talk about the electability of candidates of color, right? And we see it in this conversation about the Texas U.S. Senate race. Well, Jasmine Crockett can't win. Why can't Jasmine Crockett win? And they come up with all kinds of excuses, and eventually they get to the point. Well, basically they want to say, I just don't know if a black woman can appeal, to that unicorn moderate white Republicans that we are going to bring over, because this is the election in which they're going to finally, vote for the Democrat. We need to stop. We need to put the bottle down, because we've been saying that. I just turned 50 years old, man. We've been trying to play that model for how you win in the South for the entirety of my life, right? And it has not worked. And
you've lived it. You've lived it.
Yes. It just doesn't work.
You've run up that hill, right?
Yes. It does not work. So we got to find something different. And you can be for Jasmine or you can be against Jasmine. That's fine based on policy. But let's not pretend that her race and her gender isn't a part of it, right? Because it is. And I think we got to be honest about these conversations. And we got to be honest. I think Colin also felt a certain way because of the conversation. It was said to somebody in a conversation that Tallarico said that Colin, I can't even remember what it was, that he was, I'm so tired right now. My brain's not working. Tallarico said that he was.
That's okay, because our platform isn't working.
Yes, I know. So, but nonetheless, basically, I think Colin was getting at, and I wholeheartedly agree with him on this, is that when you look at the black community in particular, there is no other demographic in this country that is as loyal to a one party as the African American community. 85% plus black men vote Democratic. 90% plus black women vote Democratic. So when the opportunities that we get leaders from our community to show up, you don't have to vote for them if you don't agree with them on their policy stances, but at the very least, you have to respect them, respect who the communities that they are representing, and show them respect in that sense. Because if nothing more than the commitment that the community has made on behalf of this Democratic Party and on behalf of the nation. So politics right now is this ugly. I'm not having fun on either the Democratic side or just in general, because I just don't know where we're going as a nation, Matt. And it's it's just a bit unnerving, to be quite honest.
There, you put your finger on something really interesting. And by the way,
Yeah,
I'll give a
and
programming note for people who've stuck it out with us.
it was mediocre black man. That's the phrase, mediocre black man. But
Right,
Tallarico said he was
right,
defining
right, right,
his campaign and not him.
right. Yes, I look. That's awkward. Let's not kid ourselves. That's really awkward. And just of sticking your foot in your mouth. And I mean, you're putting your on something very interesting. And by the way, I will say, for people who stuck this with us, again, I apologize. I don't know what's going on today. There have been some comments in the chats. Maybe Musk has finally figured out how many people we reach on the Blue Amp channel and on my Substack, and he's like, no, this shall not stand. I don't like it. And so maybe we're getting taken down. Maybe we're getting doged today. I don't know. I appreciate people sticking with us. We'll see. We end up with some kind of a decent recording of this that we can send out. I'm happy. So maybe I'll make this the final prompt and final, and I'll let you kind of go on this, and then we'll get you out of here. Interesting that you refer to kind of a sense of you're not having fun with any of this. I think it was the Hidden Tribes report a few years ago that defined an exhausted majority. I think many of us, even if we're partisans strongly on one side, you're the definition of a partisan. You were the chair of the fucking party, man. I mean, we may be partisans, but we can still be part of the exhausted majority. I think politics has become exhausting. I'm also becoming, and this is a long, long rant for another time, but I'm going to tee it up to you and let you kind of go off on it. I'm becoming increasingly worried that American politics and the way we have set it up and designed it is no longer able to address our biggest problems. It's a proposition to you. Do an example earlier of the electoral college is completely functional. We're seeing the way our system is straining when you have someone who's determined to be in and no problem in court. And you're called a mediocre black man on top of everything else. So do you think that our political systems, that the entire design is capable of self-healing and addressing our societal problems and moving us past the point we're at? Or do you think our problems have kind of grown beyond that? Are we going to dig ourselves out?
Man, I am traditionally a very optimistic person. But I'm not very optimistic on this point. And it makes me sad that I can't be, because partly I don't know if we have the will as a nation to dig ourselves out. I think there's a swath of us who just, it's sort of don't want to inform themselves about the process, or are not informed about the process, and so therefore sees it as totally dysfunctional, not necessary, and so therefore they don't want to get involved. There's a swath of us who likes the dysfunction because they don't want things to operate. They don't believe that government should have a role. There's a swath of us who have, they get more sheer entertainment out of fighting folks that they probably have agreement with 60-70% of the time than the entertainment they get with those who they don't agree with 90% of the time, right? And so the whole damn thing is so dysfunctional at this point that I don't know if you can pull together the coalition of the willing in order to save it. And that's the disheartening thing to me, is like, we are so broken up as a nation, that I just don't know if, it's sort of the boat sinking, right? And the question is, can you get enough people to realize that the boat is sinking, go down to the hull and fix it? Or, we might get to the point where folks don't realize it until it's too late. The boat's sunk. And then there's nothing to salvage. And so, when we get to the point where our allies in the other countries of the world, our NATO allies who no longer trust us, who no longer value the friendship and relationship with us, then the only people out there to save us is ourselves. And I just don't trust that at this juncture. I just don't see it. So that's not to say that we give up and we don't fight. Those of us who are aware, those of us who know the importance, those of us who want to make sure that the future is bright for our kids. That's not to say, despite all the doom and gloom, that we just give up, that we throw our hands up and we don't do anything. I think we have to continue to fight until we can't fight anymore. I think we got to continue to do things until we can't do anything else. But the long-term prospects right now, unless we have a major course correction, the long-term prospects right now aren't very optimistic. And I hope, the 26 midterms can be a part of that course correction. I hope then we can build on that to get to 2028. But we got to have something to break the fever here, man. Because it's getting into some really, really dangerous territory.
I mean, we have reached the limit where I told your producers I would get you out of here, and I'm going to. And thank you for bearing with all of the technical challenges that we've had today. And I'll just go back to what you said. You are an optimistic person. I know this about you. And so I think what I just heard from you was you channeling a lot of the frustration and fear and a lot of the challenge that we're all feeling. And, look, I think at least we get to be together on things like this and kind of normalize that for each other. Those of us who have been in this professionally for a long time, I don't think any of us are fixing to give up the.
No, we can't give up, Matt. We can't.
So people can find the Substack. We can't. Then, as people used to say 20 years ago in a very different context, the terrorists win. The MAGAs win. We're not going to do that. We're not going to give up the country and the people who, are going to be victimized, essentially, as we're seeing happening right now. So we'll stay in the fight. We'll take a deep breath. We'll come back at it. People can find your pod at our table on YouTube, on Substack, and I hope they will follow and subscribe to you there. Jimmy, thanks so much.
Thanks, buddy. And look forward to talking with you again sometime soon, my friend.
Yes, when we can actually string several words together that we can all hear mutually. So, all right. I'm booting Jay right now to his next show. And look, I had a whole plan. for a closing rant here. I had a whole bunch of things that I was ready to talk about. I was going to talk Epstein files. I was going to talk epic lying. I was going to talk some great clips that I had set up. I had a plan, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And in this case, the enemy is the Doge gremlins out there that are screwing with our entire enterprise today. It's incredibly frustrating. It's driving me nuts. And I'm sure it's driving you nuts. And I just really appreciate all of you who have hung on through all of this, through all the lags and all the interruptions and all the technical problems. I'm going to go back. I'm going to huddle with Cliff Schechter. We're going to figure out what the heck's going on today. And we'll try to fix it. In the meantime, I'm going to just, I repeat to my kids all the time, my favorite thing that I learned in college was always leave a party while having a good time, before diminishing marginal returns set in. In this case, we're not having such a great time. And I'm going to leave matters get worse because I've exhausted everyone's patience at this point. But I appreciate Jamie. I appreciate all of you. We'll wrap up here. And I hope people will tune in for the Political Rehab Show on Friday. It's on the Substack, worthknowing.substack.com. And we'll be back next week. I've got an amazing guest next week, New York Times Magazine writer Jason Zengerle, who's out with a fascinating new book. It's going to be a bestseller about Tucker Carlson. Really looking forward to that. So I hope people will tune in next week. In the meantime,